Coello really pulled his weight, and the real reason and my initial thoughts as to why Coello and Tapia managed to win this final this time and finally managed to beat Galán after a couple of defeats in a row is due to Coello's increase in level. I thought he was superb throughout the whole final.
Coello played amazingly throughout the whole match, but I do think like Tapia played really well as well in the first two sets, and it was really the sort of last set that it just felt like mentally he was maybe a bit sort of distracted, talking about like future matchups against these guys. As now Tapia and Coello have done this adjustment, Galán and Chingotto are probably going to go and think about something that they can do in the next match. And I think this is what's so like good and great about the sport, because at the end of the day, it's just going to make all of the players even better. I could see like Chingotto potentially changing up his vibora a bit more. I think his vibora is just it's always the same shot. Like it comes off, it's a good vibora in the sense that it's fast, it doesn't come off the ground very much, but it just always hits the sort of back glass, and that's the effect of back and then going to the side glass. I feel like he could definitely find the fence a bit more. I feel like he could vary the speeds a bit more.
Like when you watch some of the other pairs, it feels like Galán and Chingotto and the Superbivas are really in sync. It doesn't feel that way with Paquito and Lebrón. It almost feels like they're two very good players individually who are obviously going to do really well because they're two of the best paddle players out there. But I don't think that they've found the structure and the strategy to work really well together. Not yet, at least. And obviously, as I say, they had 2 match points against the eventual winners in Asunción and the number 1 ranked pair in the world. So they're clearly doing something well.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Paddle Pod, your weekly podcast covering professional paddle, presented by Hugo and Gons. We're on to episode 51. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host here today, Hugo. It's great to have you on. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Gons. I mean, still ecstatic from just having finished watching the final in, the obviously Premier Paddle tournament played in Paraguay this last week. My word. I mean, has it been the best final so far this season? Could be.
Yeah, I think all the scenarios played out. You had the moment where you definitely thought, yeah, Coello Tapia have this. Then you had a moment where you're like, nah, Chingotto and Galán, like they're definitely in this. And then at the end, you were just like in shock, basically, with how it played out. But yeah, maybe let's crack on and get into it. Should we start with? Do you want to start with the final, as it's maybe fresh in our minds?
I think it makes sense, and given that it was the main event, and I think there's so many different angles and aspects to talk about. Yeah, I'd definitely start with that.
Cool. So maybe I'll hand it over to you, Hugo, because I feel like you're eager to talk about it. So yeah, let's crack on with it, and let me know your thoughts.
Well, I mean, it's exactly what you said. I think the final just swayed from side to side various times, and just for our listeners and for those of you who haven't managed to watch it yet or don't even know the result, which I doubt that will be the case for many of you, because it's the first thing that when I woke up this morning, it's the first thing I checked out, even before watching the final. So Tapia and Coello beat Galán and Chingotto in 3 sets. The first set was 6-1 to Tapia Coello. The second set was 6-3 to Galán Chingotto. And then the third set was an epic tiebreak that Tapia and Coello won. So 7-6 in the third to the Kings, the number 1 ranked pair in the world. And, well, I mean, maybe looking at the data a little bit, because I've had a bit of time to look at the overall statistics just to back up kind of my feeling, and they do very much back up what my thoughts and emotions were throughout the match. Galán once again was probably the best player of the final. He had these statistics and data are courtesy, obviously, and once again, I mean, it's always the case, courtesy of Paddle Intelligence. So thanks very much, Vianney. But yeah, his total score in the final was plus 30.9. This is Galán I'm talking about. To put that into perspective, Tapia's score in the final was plus 9.6. And I mean, we've seen a few of the amazing points that he managed to, Tapia's just, well, they're standard points for him. They're amazing points for the rest of us, the mortals. But yeah, Chingotto, for example, had a minus 3.1 compared to Galán's plus 30.9. So I think that puts into perspective how good Galán was throughout the final and throughout the whole week, to be fair. But Coello was very close, I think. And I actually think Coello was the leader of the pair when talking about Tapia and Coello, because his contribution score was plus 28.1. So almost 3 times, actually, no, more than 3 times higher than Tapia's. And that was pretty much my feeling throughout the final. The thing is that going into kind of the play and what my feeling was when I was watching the match, Galán and Chingotto followed the structure and the strategy that's worked for them so far, and they played the big majority of the balls to Coello. So Coello played 65% of the balls in his partnership with Tapia. Whereas when you look at Galán and Chingotto, it was very even. Galán played 51% of the balls and Chingotto played 49%. So their strategy of taking the ball and keeping the ball away from Tapia, well, that they kept it going. And funnily enough, this time it ended up not working. I think Coello really pulled his weight, and the real reason and my initial thoughts as to why Coello and Tapia managed to win this final this time and finally managed to beat Chingalan after a couple of defeats in a row is due to Coello's increase in level. I thought he was superb throughout the whole final. His smashing was actually really good and actually has been really good throughout the whole week, but in the final in particular, it was really good. His rulos to the metallic mesh, the front half of the wall on the court were excellent. And I think his volleying in particular was really good as well. He was going back to what he's got us used to when he actually anticipates the other players' ground stroke and gets in front of the ball and just smashes it. No need to just put spin on the ball, just a flat smash. And he did that so many times throughout the final. So I think his level was key in the final. Obviously, Tapia, won those 2 unbelievable points when they were 5-4 down, and it was, Coello and Chingotto's serve to win the match. But I think beyond that, the main reason why they won it was because Coello's level was through the roof. I mean, 35 winners, 12 unforced errors. That's just superb.
Yeah, and I feel like Coello, by the way, and I completely agree with you. I think the difference this week versus last time when we spoke about the final or the other match, in Sevilla, was that they Coello this time won the cross-court battle clearly against Chingotto, and I felt like in their last match, I believe it was actually the semi-final in Sevilla, Chingotto was just clearly beat Coello in that sort of cross-court matchup. And to your point as well, I feel like Coello played amazingly throughout the whole match, but I do think like Tapia played really well as well in the first 2 sets. And it was really the sort of last set that it just felt like mentally he was maybe a bit sort of distracted. Emotionally, you can see sometimes there as well that it almost felt like he wasn't motivated in a way. And there's like a couple of points, I think that one that you mentioned where he got it back, where he was, and it was like Chingotto and Galán serving for the match, and he got an amazing smash back. And that's where he got like really pumped up and motivated. And I feel like that happens with Tapia sometimes, that it feels like during the match, if he's not like 100% or motivated, or it's perhaps due to the lack of volume that he's receiving, it's hard for him to be in the match. But he needs that sort of spur from like Coello or just that 1 point to really get him back on. And then, I mean, in the tiebreak, I felt like Coello was definitely sort of like a bit of the leader, but Tapia definitely did quite well. They just both like absolutely were on top form in the tiebreak. But Tapia, I felt, started actually the match really well for me. And you can also see that from the contribution score of the players, and maybe we'll post the image as sort of they go on. You can clearly see Tapia Coello very similar level. And then that starts to become quite sort of different in the 3rd set, where Coello definitely continues an upward trend and Tapia sort of drops off a bit. But I also maybe going a bit deeper into the Coello Chingotto cross court battle, which I think was essentially the determinant of this match. I feel like one of the main difference was Coello, and you mentioned it, utilizing that rulo a lot more. And I feel like it was the combination of the rulo and the portres. He was able to hide his portres sometimes quite well. And there's actually a couple of times where Chingotto got caught out, which he normally doesn't because he's so fast. But I feel like the rulo, what it did is sort of opened that sort of it opened the angles and the width essentially of the court, and it left the middle a lot more open. And I feel like he didn't abuse as much his sort of bíbora or bandeja, which is normally quite comfortable for Chingotto to block. So the fact that he would open the angle, it would mean that it's harder for Chingotto to like be really at the net and cover it and do and essentially produce an offensive shot over it. And a lot of the times it would actually have to be Galán that would have to sort of pick it back up, because the ball is sort of ending up in the middle. But I feel like in a way it's maybe Chingotto was happy to leave him that, because it obviously means that Coello has to risk it a lot more. And maybe Chingotto was like, look, if he gets them all in, then fair play to him, but I'm going to give him that space and I'm going to let him open that. So in that sense, I mean, fair play to Coello, because he was amazing, and in the semi-final as well. I mean, this week he's been really top notch. But yeah, for me that was the sort of main takeaways of the final. And then going back to Galán, you were mentioning as well. I mean, he was absolutely sensational. I feel like maybe in the first set you had a bit of like a bit of a wonky start, and then funnily enough, I also felt like Tapia was using the ruler quite well in the first set, which was quite surprising. It's normally not such a common shot that you see him use a lot, but he was also getting Galán quite a bit on sort of the fence. But after that, I think he started to feel really comfortable, and yeah, he also played quite well. But I mean, so far this matchup is just like everything we've dreamed of, really.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be the matchup that everyone wants to see right now. I think they're the top, they're the two most informed pairs in the world. I don't really think there's a big doubt in that. And just going back to your point a little bit about why both Coello and also Tapia were using the rulo. As we previously said, I think Galán and Chingotto have demonstrated that they're probably the two best players when they're up tight to the net. They're so good at blocking. Coello's probably up there and thereabouts, but them two together, they've been so powerful at as soon as they can, they win the net, and they're very happy to just sit there and take a risk and try to block another player's shot, whether it's a bíbora, whether it's a bajada. And I think the reason why they were playing the rulos is because, as you say, they'd find an extra angle on the court. And even though it's riskier, if you do manage to find the fence, then they can't really, they're going to struggle to block it. And if they do, then the partner, so if Tapia's played the rulo, Coello's, if he's alert, then he moves in and then wins that ball from the volley that comes from Galán or Chingotto getting that ball back at the net. So I think tactically it made a lot of sense. And when you think about the tactics of the final, I think Chingotto and Galán played exactly the same way as they've been playing against Tapia and Coello recently. Makes sense. It's been pretty successful. I think the big difference is that Tapia and Coello trusted Coello's blocks a lot more. So when we were thinking about the previous matches that they played this season, I almost felt that Coello wasn't trusting his blocking and his net play as much. And when Chingotto was playing his víboras, he wasn't going up to the net to press them and to try and block them and win the net. Whereas in this final, he did that a lot of times. And even though there were a lot of times where the ball would go straight out because there wasn't a great block and Chingotto's vívora was good, and obviously there was too much power on the ball to be able to block it. I think that over the course of the final worked wonders for them, because Coello at the back of the court, we've seen that he's not as comfortable as probably any of the other three players. When you think about Tapia, Chingotto, and Galán at the back of the court, they're probably 3 or 4 of the best players in the world, and they're so comfortable to be defending at the back, but Coello really isn't. So his game style is coming up to the net fast and blocking those shots, and he wasn't really doing that against Chingotto. So I really do think that was key to the final, trusting his level, trusting his natural ability to be able to block those balls. And obviously he's so big and it's so hard to get past him that it makes sense. And then you've got, if Chingotto's Biborat was good enough to get past him, Tapia would make a run and cover him in behind. And we know how good Tapia is at that. So I think that's got to be their game plan going forward. And even though the final was very even, and I do agree that Chingotto and Galán basically had it when they were 5-4 up and serving, because probably due to Tapia's kind of loss, I think he made two big mistakes which gave Chingotto and Galán the break in the third set, and I think mentally he lost it a bit. But I think that beyond that, it did feel that that Coello and Tapia had finally cracked the way to play against Chingalan. And yeah, I do think that they dominated the final. I think the only real reason why they struggled at the end was because of those 2-3 balls that Tapia potentially, he committed a few errors, and that led both him and Goya to doubt themselves a bit. But I think overall throughout the final, I thought they dominated.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, the first set was just a complete wash by Goy and Tapia. They were like a tornado out there, and Galán and Chingotto had like no clue what to do. Then in the second set, they were a bit more solid, but I still felt like Goy and Tapia were pretty much there. I mean, at the end of the day, it was just a 6-3. And then in the third set, Goy and Tapia start 2-0 up. They could have like easily gone into 3-0 up, and with like a confirmed break, and maybe like cruised it in an easier fashion that they ended up winning in it. So definitely felt like this match, with these sort of little variants that we've spoken about, sort of it made them be in control of the match. And it almost felt like in the third set, they just let Galán and Chingotto like an opportunity for them to get away with the match. But in the end, one of the things that I also highlight this pair, and it's Coello Tapia that I'm speaking about now, is that mental side. It's just unbelievable how in so many instances it seems like they're down. It seems like they're sort of resting they're sort of returning, to be in the match, or they're match point down, or they're in a tie break, and they just somehow end up winning. Like, it's honestly incredible. And I feel like a match against them is just never really over until it actually is. And they saved a couple of match points in the semi-final against Paquito and Lebrón. So honestly, it's absolutely unbelievable from a mental standpoint. And I feel like Coello, to your point of that being aggressive and being at the net and really sort of being confident, I feel like his mentality this week has been top notch. And he actually spoke about it after the final. I think he said something like, I've been dreaming, or I haven't been able to sleep, of like in terms of like just thinking, how am I going to beat this guys? And I feel like there was an air to him of like him being like frustrated and mad, and just being like, I really want to win this. So yeah, I mean, and again, I think maybe talking about like future matchups against these guys is, now Tapia and Coello have done this adjustment. Galán and Chingotto are probably going to go and think about something that they can do in the next match. And I think this is what's so like good and great about the sport, because at the end of the day, it's just going to make all of the players even better, right? Because now Galán and Chingotto are going to have to think of a new way, are going to have to think of a new shot, are going to have to think about a new tactic. And Coello and Tapia, if they then it works, then Coello Tapia again are going to have to adjust, and it just makes each player, each matchup, each time better. So yeah, I mean, it's happy days, I think, for the world of paddle, and for us fans that we love it so much.
Agreed, and definitely happy days for Tapia and Coello, because as you said, both Tapia and Coello mentioned that they struggled recently trying to think, and well, as you said, Coello said, I haven't been able to sleep trying to think about how I can beat these guys. Well, beat Chingalan. And they've done it. And as I say, I do really think that they dominated that match, even though it was incredibly tight. And I think that they did have the upper hand, and it was only really their mistakes that got Chingotto and Galán back in the game. Not that Chingotto and Galán played badly, not at all, but I think Tapia and Coello were a level above. And I do totally agree. I do think Chingotto and Galán are going to go away and trying to think of some adjustments. However, this is my own personal opinion. I don't know whether they can really do anything that different, whether there's a completely change in strategy that's really going to help them turn this around in their favor again, because I think what's clear is that their strategy is we're going to try and play more balls to Coello because he suffers a little bit more up in the air because potentially his Bibora or his Bandeja aren't as good and his smashing is a bit more inconsistent. I don't really think that playing more balls to Tapia is going to help them. I mean, Tapia is the best player in the world alongside Galán in my eyes, and probably in the eyes of pretty much every paddle fan out there. So I mean, it'll be really interesting to see what they go for and how they change this, because this game plan's pretty much worked, apart from obviously this time, but they only lost 7-6 in the tiebreak. And yeah, just looking forward to see how the tactics evolve and how Chingalan now try to do it again.
Yeah, it's a fun challenge for Jorge Martinez, but I have no doubt that he'll come up with something that will throw them off. I mean, I could see like Chingotto potentially changing up his Vibora a bit more. I think his Vibora is just it's always the same shot. Like it comes off. It's a good Vibora in the sense that it's fast. It doesn't come off the ground very much, but it just always hits the sort of back glass, and that's the effect of back and then going to the side glass. I feel like he could definitely find the fence a bit more. I feel like he could vary the speeds a bit more, and then maybe somehow there like essentially move Koya a bit more, because I feel like now his Vibora is pretty much always the same. But yeah, I'm sure that they'll figure something out for the next time.
It's an interesting analysis because I do remember a couple of Chingotto's Biwaras going to the fence and they won the point. So I do think that should be a strategy going forward, much like Goya and Tapia. They've looked for the fence and it's worked for them. So yeah, very excited. But maybe, we have actually spoken about the final for quite a bit of time. And I'm pretty happy with the analysis that we've gone for. Maybe we want to talk about some of the other matches, some of the other pairs, because it's been a hell of a week out in Asunción in Paraguay.
For sure. I think maybe we can start to talk about Paquito and Lebrón, who've had a good performance. They've definitely been a step closer than last time. So now even having a couple of match points to nearly make the final and nearly beat the world number one, Coello and Tapia. And the question that I wanted to ask you, Hugo, is, are you more encouraged or less encouraged by Paquito's and Lebrón performance and what this can do for them going forward?
Yeah, I'm 100% in this on the side of way more encouraged. I thought they were really, really good against Tapia and Coello. Obviously, well, for those of you who don't know, they literally had 2 match points against Tapia and Coello. So more than Chingotto and Galán had, because frankly, they didn't even have a match point against Coello and Tapia. So yeah, I thought both Paquito and Lebrón were really good throughout the whole of the week, and specifically in the semi-final against, Tapia and Coello, the Kings, they were both pretty good. Paquito had 17 winners, and 11 enforced errors. Lebrón had, his contribution was a little bit better, 2 more winners and 2 less enforced errors. So I did think that Lebrón was potentially a step above Paquito. However, I do think that Lebrón committed a couple of key mistakes in that semi-final. Some like easy shots that he tried to go for, he tried to maybe hit too hard or be a little bit too aggressive. And I think that basically gave Coello and Tapia hope. I think that Paquito was really, funnily enough, was really calm and collected. And obviously he's a very experienced player, same as Lebrón. But I felt that Paquito throughout the whole of the semi-final against Coello and Tapia, he was very calm and he was very strategic. And I thought that he played really well in that cross-court battle against Tapia, which obviously is not easy at all. In terms of, as I say, I'm much more encouraged by them. I thought they did really well. My only but is I don't have a feeling that they play as a team as much as I'd like to see. So I don't have a feeling that they give each other that many assists. It doesn't feel like one prepares the point and one finishes it. So like when you watch some of the other pairs, it feels like Galán and Chingotto and the Superpibes are really in sync. It doesn't feel that way with Paquito and Lebrón. It almost feels like they're 2 very good players individually who are obviously going to do really well because they're 2 of the best paddle players out there. But I don't think that they've found the structure and the strategy to work really well together. Not yet, at least. And obviously, as I say, they had 2 match points against the eventual winners in Asunción and the number 1 ranked pair in the world. So they're clearly doing something well. And I am very encouraged by their individual performances. My only question is whether they're going to start having a clearer structure of play and potentially just a little bit more consistent during the key moments, because, well, I mean, they won the first set 6-2 and then they go and lose the second one 6-love. I mean, that's a big hit to their confidence. I know they then turned it around and managed to have 2 set points in the third set, but yeah, it just felt like as soon as they were down in that second set, down a break or maybe down 2 breaks, they were all already thinking of a third set. They almost didn't have the courage, and they didn't believe in turning that set round, which I don't think you would ever see from, for example, the Superpibes or Chingotto and Galán. So those would be my only questions, but very encouraged by their individual performances and excited for what's to come.
Nice. So I'm going to say more encouraged as well. They were definitely close and closer than last time. So it feels like they are slowly but surely making their way there. Maybe next time it's instead of match points, maybe next time is they actually make the final. So it is definitely feel like it's getting a bit better. I think we've spoken about this as well. And another point that I think sort of let them down a bit was the, sort of that mental side. Not only did they have 2 match points and couldn't finish it off, but they throughout the match converted only 2 out of 8 break points that they had, and their score on important points both for Lebrón and for Paquito was negative, whereas for Coello and Tapia was positive. And when you're playing the world number ones, or when you're playing Chingotto and Galán, or when you're playing Los Superpibes, it's just moments and details. So you have to be really on it at every single point. And even so, the more important points as well, you can't really let your foot off the gas. So I think those are the sort of things that they sort of need to start working on. I then also completely agree with you on that sort of playing style analysis. It still doesn't feel exactly, or you can still kind of can't really tell exactly what they're really trying to play at. I feel like Chingotto and Galán and Los Superpibes and Coello and Tapia have like very, very apparent, very easy to see playing styles and what they want to do. Whereas I do agree with you that Paquito and Lebrón still doesn't feel as cohesive as probably the rest of the pairs, or the top pairs, is like how they look. So definitely have to work on that. But yeah, more encouraged for sure. Now I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate here. And
of course you are.
Because I do think that is more encouraged. But when I look at the future, so one of the things for me, I feel like this sort of court was really suited for them. I feel like if they would have played Coello and Tapia in like a very humid, very hot, sort of, I guess, what we're heading into now in the summer, that very fast court type conditions, I don't think it would have been as close. So I guess, and me, and one of the things that I've always expressed about this sort of partnership is the finishing ability of both Paquito and Lebrón, just not being at like that top notch when you compare with sort of the best of the best. So I guess going forward, do you think that in a way they wasted a chance because this almost like fell perfect to them? Like they had 2 match points, they were against the world number ones, they played in conditions that I would argue are quite good for them. And even Paquito said that finally this was the first time that they're playing in like a court that was like slowish, although it didn't seem crazy slow from outside. But yeah, what do you think about that?
I mean, I totally see your point. I do think that it was more suited to them than to Goya and Tapia, for example. But at the same time, I would say that it was quite suited to Chingotto and Galán. And I would say it was quite suited to the Superpibes. So, because I almost feel like those 3 pairs, as in Paquito Lebrón, Chingotto and Galán, and the Superpibes, they all really they probably prefer slightly slower courts because you just don't want to play Coello and Tapia on a fast court. That's obviously clearly advantageous to them because they're two absolute animals up in the air, and their overhead game is well better than anyone else's. I mean, Galán is obviously in that game and in that cohort, but unfortunately Chingotto isn't, and it's the same with Stupa and Nenno. I'd feel like Stupa is almost pretty much in that cohort, but Nenno's not yet, even though he's improved his smashing. So fast courts clearly benefit Coello and Tapia, but slow courts, there's a lot of other pairs, and I think the three out of the top four pairs are very comfortable on those courts. So I just don't know. Would you say Paquito and Lebrón are better suited to a slow court than the Superpibes? Maybe not. I'm not convinced. So I mean, Paquito obviously alluded to it, as you said. He was happy to finally see a slower court, and it clearly helps him. But I don't think it helps Lebrón, for example, even though he can adapt to any kind of court. And obviously, I know that we are heading into the summer, but we've obviously still got another 2 tournaments out in LATAM, and it's not going into the summer over there. It's actually going into the winter. So they still have a couple of big opportunities to perform and win a tournament over there. And I think when you think of, I think what this partnership needs, what Lebrón and Paquito need, is one big win, one big tournament to really kind of stamp their foot down and say, here we are. And I think that's what basically enabled Galán to suddenly spark and become what they've become. I think Lebrón and Paquito are just that step away. And when you think about it, they played against the Superpibes last week, a couple of weeks ago, in Seville. 3 sets. They were close to winning it, and I almost thought they dominated that match, but they didn't. Same here against Tapia and Coello, 2 match points. So they are there. What I would say is I'd love to watch them play Galán, not just because of the excitement of watching Lebrón against Galán, but just to see how they fare, because it's the only matchup out of the top 4 pairs that we haven't watched yet. And I think it would be a great test for them, because it'd be interesting to see whether they can really challenge. But yeah, going back to your point, I do think they're suited to slower courts. But when you look at the other top 4 pairs, it's only Coello and Tapia that really, really favor the fast courts. So I still think they can perform pretty much anywhere, because they're 2 of the best players in the world.
And looking ahead to next week, have you seen their draw? Because it's absolutely mental.
It's a tough draw, right?
Yeah, it's a very tough draw. So I mean, if just next week, I'm not sure that they're gonna break it, or they're gonna make that breakthrough, because they've got, in theory, in the round of 16, they would have Koki and John, who they've lost to.
True.
They would have Yanguas and Garrido in the quarterfinals, who, as we've said, have an amazing start of the season and probably the best sort of top 5 for sure this year so far. Then they would have Coello and Tapia in the semis again, and then possibly Chingotto and Galán or los Superpibes in the final. So that's a hell of a run to go through.
It's a tough draw. What I would say is I thought the same thing this week when looking at Coello and Tapia's draw, because obviously they just come from a couple of defeats against Galán, probably a few doubts in their minds, and they had to play Bergamini and Victor Ruiz in the first round, then Yanguas and Garrido in the quarterfinals. Then they also obviously had to beat Paquito and Lebrón in the semis, and then Galán in the final, and they did it. So yeah, I completely see your point. And if I had to bet my house on a pair, it wouldn't be them, simply due to looking at the draw. Also very excited to watch Lebrón play Yanguas and Garrido again. I mean, sparks are going to go off in that matchup, particularly if you're chucking in Paquito into the equation. I mean, it could literally go off. But yes, I just think it's going to be tough. And obviously I wouldn't bet on them if I had to bet on one pair. But if they want to do it, they're going to have to go through at the very least 2 of the top 4 pairs in the semis and the final. So I mean, Koki and John, yes, they've beaten them, but I don't think they're having their best season either. And Yanguas and Garrido are having a obviously sensational season, and they are probably the best of the rest, as we mentioned and discussed throughout our last episode. But I think they're struggling to crack the top pairs right now. So they could also struggle against Paquito and Lebrón.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, they've never played them, so it can definitely we don't really know, right? We can't really assess. They've definitely struggled against Coello and Tapia. We've seen that multiple times this season. But yeah, it's gonna be a really interesting tournament. I think. I mean, if they do manage to pull it off, then I'll take back everything I said because it will be a hell of a run. And then yeah, can you just imagine a potential final? Like they go through all of these players and then potential final against Chingotto and Galán. I mean, that would be insane.
It
Uh,
it would be a sensational final. I mean, I'd say the final that I most want to watch, but it isn't really because I obviously I'm a fanboy of Goya and Tapia. But yeah, it'd be a great final, and I just want to see Lebrón and Galán play each other. Yeah, I think it'd be a really really interesting matchup.
for sure. So maybe now moving on, potentially our last topic that we can discuss. We also wanted to talk a bit about Los Super Pibes. And I think, Hugo, the question you wanted to ask me was have Chingalan officially surpassed Los Super Pibes, I guess, as the number two seed? Well, yeah, like the second best pair in tour, basically.
Yeah, are they the second favourites in the long run? Are they the favourites for the second spot of the Premier Padel rankings? Yeah, be great to get your thoughts. I mean, I think I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, didn't take a lot of time to think about this one because I just think it's pretty obvious. And I'm gonna say yes, because I mean, in the sort of any way you look at this, it's a yes, because firstly, they're now the number two seed, so officially they are sort of the second best pair on tour. Then if I look at their head to head, Chingalan are leading that. Also, they've beaten Los Super Pibes three times, so it's 3-love and head to head. They've been to more finals than Los Super Pibes, and they've won more titles this season. So I just can't say no. Now I do think I still think very much that there is going to be a time where Los Super Pibes are going to be at the top and they're going to be sort of more in that final, more challenging the sort of Coello, Tapia and Chingalan. I feel like now this is the moment Chingotto and Galan are having. And you can see that the Super Pibes tactic is starting to pay off. We've spoken about how they're just generating a lot more winners than before, but it's also coming now with a bit of more unforced errors. So that's, I guess, maybe if they can sort of adjust a bit to that as they had in the past, they were just such a consistent pair. But it feels like this is sort of the route that they want to go into, and you can't expect for them to all of a sudden be changing their essentially their paddle style and the way they've been playing and starting and expected to pay dividends from the start. So I feel like Chingotto and Galan haven't had to adjust their games entirely. I feel like they're just using what they both are generally quite good at, and it sort of complements them as a pair. So and we've sort of spoken about this before now in the sense that like can I see Chingotto and Galan improving a lot more than what they currently are? And I think Hugo, you mentioned that you had doubts about that. I possibly as well. I mean, there's definitely things that Chingotto I think can do better offensively, but it does feel like there is that sort of ceiling ish to the game, and part of it is potentially because they don't need to. Right now, we'll see with Coello and Tapia how they adjust to that, because maybe now they do need to adjust their game, but Los Super Pibes are going through this transformation of the game, so it's going to take time. So I do feel like for now, it definitely I definitely don't see them as the second best pair as we potentially saw them at the beginning of the season or heading into the season. So yeah, it's a yes for me in terms of Chingotto and Galan being the second best pair. And to be honest, I think they will be the main contenders for that. Not necessarily for the number one spot because of points and stuff, but like there will be sort of in terms of when we look at the titles and who's won the most titles, I think it'll be between Coello, Tapia, and Chingotto and Galan this season.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree regarding them being the second best pair right now, and probably the favourites for the number two spot. Now, I do love playing a bit of devil's advocate, and my feeling is that I'm already seeing Galan and Chingotto just not at the peak that they've well, basically made us accustomed to over the last few weeks. It's totally normal because it's impossible to play that well. And I just think that both Lebrón and Paquito and the Superpibes, Stupan y Nenno, are so ambitious that they're not going to stop until they manage to beat them and break that barrier. And as I just mentioned previously, I think as soon as either the Superpibes or Paquito and Lebrón break that barrier, then they have the upper hand. Once they've beaten Chingotto and Galán once, they will have the upper hand. And it's just, I think Padel, I mean, we've spoken about it so many times, how important the mental side is to the sport. And I did think that in this semi-final when Stupan y Nenno played Chingotto and Galán, I thought they were really good. I mean, I thought potentially the score was a bit misleading because Stupan y Nenno won the first set 6-3, and then the latter two sets were 6-2, 6-2, but they didn't really feel that way. And yeah, I mean, trying to figure out why it's happening, and genuinely, I just have a feeling that it's the important points and not going the way that Stupan y Nenno want them to go. Obviously, you can just blame it on that and say that they will eventually turn it around. Maybe that's being a bit basic, but my genuine feeling, is that I just think that to an extent they've been a bit unlucky. I think that, well, they beat Paquito and Lebrón just a couple of weeks ago in Seville in a match that Paquito and Lebrón were dominating, and they were obviously playing at home. And I think they're playing really, really good paddle. I just think that, hey, they've come up against Chingotto and Galán, who are almost unbeatable, and it's hard to fight against, well, Coello and Tapia, obviously, because they're dominating paddle right now. But I just think we saw last season how they started the season, they couldn't beat Coello and Tapia. They'd beaten them one in about 10 or 12 matches, and suddenly they beat them in Valladolid, and they almost ended up as the number one ranked pair in the world at the end of the season. So I just think I don't know whether the change is going to happen now in Mar del Plata, literally this week in Argentina, which obviously I'm very excited about, or whether it'll happen in a month or 2 months. But I do think that there's going to be another major change, same as Chingalán, have suddenly sparked and become the main rivals for Coello and Tapia. I just think that both Stupan y Nenno and Paquito and Lebrón are bound to have their moment. And at that point, it's going to be a case of how much they can benefit from their most informed tournaments. So yeah, but we'll see. So Chingotto and Galán, correct me if I'm wrong, they've won 2 tournaments so far, or is it 3?
Might be 3.
2, okay. Yeah, I mean,
Sevilla
2 tournaments.
And Brussels.
2 tournaments, yes, it's a lot, but it's 2 tournaments. And would you say that Paquito and Lebrón are going to win 2 tournaments between now and the end of the season? I probably would say yes. And I'd probably say the same for Stupan y Nenno. Like, it could very much happen. So it would definitely benefit Coello and Tapia, wouldn't it? Because if it starts just spreading out across all pairs, then they're going to be the ones who are benefited because they've got a good gap between them and the second ranked pair. Those are my thoughts.
So maybe a question for you then. Right now, if the season ends, well, let's just say towards the end of the season, by the end of the season, who do you think is going to have more titles? Chingotto and Galán or Stupan y Nenno?
Chingotto, Galán, or Stupan y Nenno? I mean, if I have to bet right now, obviously I'd bet on Chingotto and Galán. 2 tournaments.
And even if you take those 2 tournaments out, so let's say 0-0.
There you go. If it's 0-0, great question. I genuinely would really struggle. I'd really struggle. I just think so much can change that you just never know. It's hard. Probably if I had to bet my house on something, it would be Chingalán, having watched their recent performances. But I still think that we haven't watched them enough to be 100% certain that they are the main alternative. I just think that something can change. Tiredness is going to kick in. I'm still a big believer that Galán cannot continue at this level for much longer because it's just a joke. I mean, he's just a step above everyone. And looking at this week in Asunción, I did have a feeling that specifically Chingotto was maybe not playing as well as he'd been for the last couple of tournaments. But that could be my feeling. What do you think, Gons?
No, I definitely give the upper hand to Galán and Chingotto. I just think that and I'm not like trying to be prisoner of the moment or anything. I just think that from a paddle perspective, Chingotto is playing the best of his life and potentially being that level of like Stupa and Nenno, and Galán is just the best player in the world. So I think when I combine them, both of them, and the ability that Galán has to finish points is definitely much higher than Stupas and Nenno. So yeah, I think from that perspective, I definitely feel like Chingotto and Galán are in my eyes they're sort of like they will end up with more titles. And I just feel as well, I'm not sure if it's sort of this sort of new playing style for Stupan Nenno is gonna sort of they're going to have enough time or is going to kick in at the right time. So then, the season, there's still plenty to go and stuff like that. We don't really know when they're going to have that big breakthrough, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And it could be at a point where potentially you're heading towards the end of the season and maybe there are not that many tournaments left or whatever. So yeah, that's, I guess those are my main question marks from Stupandina's side.
Yeah, I mean, I still have a major question mark regarding should they have changed their style of play that much, because they were literally touching the number one ranked spot towards the end of last season, playing their game style, obviously trying to be more aggressive here and there. That's normal. But I personally think that Stupas sometimes tries to go for slightly too many smashes that are really, really hard. And they're just so good at getting an extra ball in and an extra ball in. And why not? If this isn't working, say this doesn't work for the next couple of tournaments, maybe they should backtrack. And it'd be interesting to see whether, if that happens, whether they do backtrack and they're like, right, this is not working, back to basics and let's try that. Yeah, we'll see. But hey, if I'm going to be honest, and if I had to bet, who do I think is going to be the most successful pair between now and the end of the season out of the top three pairs that we've discussed, not including Coello and Tapia? It would be Galán. And funnily enough, I think, genuinely, just going back to the point that you said, Galán is currently the best player in the world. And his winning mentality and his winning record set him a level above. Lebrón is there, very much so. But the problem with Lebrón is that I almost feel that intrinsically, he's still not the player that he used to be, not fully. And who knows whether he will be, but I just still don't think that he is exactly the player that he used to be. And I think that's going to hinder him.
Yeah, I agree with you there. But yeah, I think maybe we should finish and wrap up the episode. It's been a blast. And yeah, for our listeners out there, we've got a match Hugo and I to play as well. So we definitely don't want to be late for that.
Correct. Yeah, we're very excited to be back on court because our debut, this streak of matches, which took place last Saturday, didn't start as expected. Tough start out in the sandy, windy, and sunny court in Ciudad La Raqueta. But hey, we're back for more. But yeah, cheers, guys. Please drop any comments or your thoughts would be great on, well, what all the topics that we've discussed and, well, whether the Kings are finally back to their best. But yeah, have a great week and see you soon.